Welcome back to another Service Management Leadership Podcast. We welcome back a guest, one of our first ones, Stephen Ollek. Stephen, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's a little chilly where I'm living at now. We had this crazy cold front come through Texas. I'm living in Texas. So, below 30 degrees is, things are shutting down, schools are closing, the world is ending kind of, but we made it through. Everything is fine. So just enjoying 2022 so far.
Oh yeah, it is quite the world we live in. So last time we talked, you were with the U.S. Army, you were living in Germany, and you mentioned moving to Texas. So tell everybody, what have you been up to?
Sure. So I finished my tour of duty, if you will, out there in Europe, working for the U.S. Army in Europe and Africa, in the service management world. So we were the service provider for all of the Army civilians, soldiers, and contractors that, use our unclassed and classified networks out there. So, as you come up on your date to what they call PCS, or do your permanent change of station back to CONUS, or Continental United States, you got options. And my wife gave me some criteria, and she's my number one customer that I have to service and make sure that she's happy. So she said warm and sunny. So we started looking in the Sun Belt, which is where seems like the whole American country population is looking at right now. And we had an opportunity to come to Texas, specifically to the Air Force. So I got recruited by an organization within the United States Air Force called Platform One. We are, a DevSecOps platform as a service, plus other, capabilities out not only to the Air Force, but also to other DoD organizations that are looking to, take monolithic, older apps that they might have on mainframes and on-premise, infrastructure, and do this thing called go to the cloud, containerize their apps, do this microservice architecture stuff you might be hearing about. And then that buzzword Kubernetes comes up, and all these like cool software things that are going on, we are enabling on behalf of not only the Air Force, but the DoD. So it's a really exciting and interesting time. Me specifically, I'm running one of our value streams that we call Party Bus. So hence the cool software kind of environment that we have. We wear hoodies all the time, no more ties and collared shirts. I mean, I've had to like put all that stuff up in the attic now. So it's completely different, but a good different. And which is why it's exciting to talk to you today, Jeffrey. We're going to talk a little bit about what that means in the service management context, and hopefully wrap a little bit of that together for those that might be curious out there.
Which is awesome, right? Blazing new ground is always fun. Feeling like you're on the edge and you're helping create outcomes. I think this world and technology, we don't talk in those words enough of, hey, you have X and you want to do Y. How do I help you do that? Sure. So let's push in on DevSecOps. For those that aren't familiar, they're not intimate with that term, what does that mean?
That is a great question, because there's probably a million people out there that have an opinion or their own kind of take on the whole idea there. So I'll level set first by saying, you might see DevSecOps, which stands for Development Security Operations. You might see DevOps out there. You might see pictures where it shows like a hybrid kind of, what do they call those? It's a type of chart that shows circles kind of overlapping. I just can't think of the name right now. But at the end of the day, we're kind of bringing those three facets of software development together. And that's where I really want to foot stomp is, some people think DevSecOps or DevOps is about the coders, the engineers, the software folks building the apps, integrating with those that use the apps. So in our world, in the DoD, having soldiers come embed as the user and do that kind of user experience testing and things like that as we develop the software, it's really not what it is. It's really meant about the internal workings of the software organization itself. You've always heard, not only with software, but other things that are produced and developed, they might get built by the engineers and the designers, they get tested by the testers, then they get maybe hardened and secured by the security folks, then they get thrown over to this thing called operations, where they have to care and feed the system, and it's all very siloed historically. In our world, it is not. We're all just one giant team working under kind of an agile mindset as well with kind of the extreme programming and Kanban type agile implementation that we've put into place. But in my opinion, DevOps or DevSecOps is more about a culture. If you really get into it and start learning about it, it's the philosophy of the organization. It's the value stream mapping of processes and looking for those ways that we can take out the non-value add steps and efforts, and then constantly focusing on delivering a value. And that word can't be not emphasized enough. And that gets into really a lot of what IDLE talks about, which is all about value, customer orientation, things like that. So, I'm talking a little bit at the highest level, not really getting specific, but I think at the end of the day, if you're interested in DevSecOps or DevOps for you and your organization, you really need to find like a good person or cadre of folks inside the organization to get smart on it. And then, make it adaptable to what your organization looks like today. And for what we have, I'm the new guy coming into this organization that's about 3 to 4 years old. A lot of what we do is really mature. So it's been me, opposite of the organization, really having to learn and inculcate into what we do as far as DevSecOps is concerned. So that was a lot of words. I hope that some of that rang true to some of those folks out there that already are doing it or looking into it. It's not really about the tools or the systems that you use. It's really about the culture and process is really the thing I'd like to focus on the most.
And I want to bring out that it's a framework, right? So the same framework, I always use the analogy of paint. You and I in different houses, in different parts of the country, in different sizes of the room could get the exact same paint color, paint a room, paint a living room, and it'll look different, right? Because the lighting's different. And I want to suggest that that's how the frameworks are as well. No, there's no two rooms the same, with the same lighting, same dimensions, all of that. And so DevSecOps may look different. Same with service management and ITIL. Now, one of the things that I hear way too frequently, and it kind of gets me going a little bit, is that people have this either or mentality, right? Like you have to do service management without this, or Agile without that, or DevSecOps without any of it. I think of it like ice cream. I love ice cream. And I go to the ice cream store and they say, do you want X or do you want Y? And I'm like, give me a double dip, please. I want them both. And because I want to see how they are together. And I think that sometimes that A plus B equals more than C. And so I wanted to get your take on those. Like, can these frameworks coexist? Can they help each other deliver or co-create, whatever word you want to use, better outcomes for the consumer, the user, the sponsor?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the easy answer to you. To expound upon it, it's funny you mentioned, ITIL is kind of the one framework that a lot of service management folks really focus in on. I would say to a certain extent in my current organization, ITIL is kind of a 4-letter word. They don't really want to hear about it. They don't want to put themselves in that box. They don't want to, constrain yourselves to what ITIL teaches and gives you guidance on, because as we all know, it's a framework, it's guidance, it's not specified and specific things and a checklist out there that you got to follow. It's just some best practices, and practices are the key word there, of how you can take those into your organization. One cool thing that I've been able to do is open their eyes to, you might not like the term ITIL, but I can tell you we're already doing service level management. We're doing supplier management. We've got little portfolio management going on. And then we get into, my mind is still very version 3, not version 4. But when you talk about, when you get into service design packages and taking a requirement and turning it into a technical solution, and then making sure that it meets the intent of, the utility warranty and all those things, we're doing all of that. And, when I construe to them, like it actually fits that same model, and it's easy to see that, lights turn on for them and they understand that, maybe it's not as bad as we thought it was. And what's kind of neat is one of the big things that we've done since I've joined the organization is really radiate out our service catalog and show the services that we offer. One of the pain points that I saw when I first joined was customers were frustrated, like extremely frustrated. We would onboard them and kind of promise the world, but deliver something that might have been less to their level of expectation. So one of the first things that we thought of doing, and we had always had the idea of, was like putting it out to the world. Like you can go to the Platform One public site and go see the Party Bus Service catalog today. And I think that's a really big win. Obviously, a next evolution of that is a dash of service level management. Let's put up some service level targets, performance measures, maybe an SLA-ish type language, so that as they order quote unquote services from us, they know what to expect when they talk about response time or availability and all those abilities that ITIL gives us as well. So I feel like it's really simple to do that. The one thing I would also challenge, and a lot of people do challenge me on it because we're agile, is they bring up the manifesto and they're like, it's about individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And I say, yes, and you're absolutely right. Let's be delivering things with people in mind and not get bogged down in the actual, writing out of the paperwork and the documentation that potentially could maybe live on a shelf that nobody ever looks at or uses. But having that documentation is really, really important half the time. And that's where we've really tailored, who can see what and what's available at any given moment. And really, it gets back to something that we've talked about earlier, is knowledge management. We've had a little bit of turnover on our team as well. And as people roll on and off, the expectation is they're ready to go almost day one. And so that we're creating that library of how-tos, videos, we call it TTPs in the military, tactics, techniques, and procedures. If they can have access to that anytime and using the tools that we have, it kind of aligns to that, I think, Agile Manifesto principle that's out there. So that's me in a nutshell, just talking about it. I'm sure there's others that have tried to marry the two together, but that's what we're doing.
So let me push in on a couple of things. First of all, I want to apologize for those of us in the service management community did a poor job over the past few decades, and service management and ITIL became a hammer and everything looked like a nail. And so there's this backlash. Apology out there in front. But second of all, I want to posit a thought for you. First time I've been bouncing this around, first time I've said this on the air. But when the Agile Manifesto talks about processes, I would position this thought that most processes for ITIL and service management are included in the tool that you use, the service management tool. Like if you go take that V3 book and for incident management, and it says identification, logging, all the way through resolution, that's what your IT service management tool is doing. So the process lives in the tool. But to your point, you have to have something below it for procedures to say, okay, Joe needs to know how to resolve this incident. Joe and Sally are assigned this incident. What do they do? And so I think that as we've moved towards these tool manufacturers adopting this ITIL best practice, that whole thought of process isn't the same conversation.
I agree. And I think, filling out, so incident management, we'll pull the thread on that for a second, triaging and getting to the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 levels and really the break fix of what incident management is all about. You're not taking into account impact and urgency, prioritization, potentially level of effort.
Right.
And then, the integration to a problem management process that you would typically do for root cause analysis. We're doing that. It's just people don't want to see, or it's not that they don't want to see, it's like it's not apparent to them that it all kind of fits together. And to your, you're making an excellent point here. All of these new, best of breed tools that are out there, they're putting it all together and they're automating a lot of it so that it's just seamless. And it can get us back to that people and interactions over processes and tools. I think there's a natural flow there, and we've designed our tools out to fit the process, but then not really belabor upon it, where if you miss one step, there's not like some internal auditor, making sure that if you miss that step, now you got to go and figure out why did you miss the step and whatever. It's just, it is what it is. And we hold, regular retrospectives to ensure the processes are always up to date and then continuously improving as well based on the needs of the team. And I think that also gets back to that individuals and interactions aspect of it.
Yeah, because the tool's fulfilling the process. You know what I mean? Like you just hit go and it sends it on to the next step and it automates it. So
Yep.
one thing I like about talking about DevSecOps and service management in the same conversation is they're both outcomes driven. Don't really care about the output here or the output there, but it's all, I'm the user, I'm the consumer. What are you doing to allow me to do my job better? What outcomes are you bringing or helping me make better decisions? Is that your thoughts as well?
Absolutely. I think what's really interesting about the way that we run our organization, it's always about value creation. And when a customer comes to us and we're trying to give them, whatever the service is, the product, service, whatever, it's about, what value did that bring them, and it gets back to the original onboarding process as they come in, the requirement hasn't truly been satisfied, verified, and validated. One really cool thing that I've learned the past few months that I have not really been privy to is this idea around objectives and key results, or OKRs.
Yes.
I would say the Army really hasn't focused too much on that. They just do a little bit different. They call them more lines of effort, which, the leader will come in potentially with their, senior leadership team or that middle management level and, do that offsite strategy planning session at the beginning of the year and say, hey, these are the big rocks that we're going to work on. Then you've got your like 4 or 5 lines of effort with maybe sub lines of effort with hopefully, a balanced scorecard approach where you're putting measures and metrics to those so that you know where you're at. The way we're doing it at Platform One, it's really interesting. We've got organizational level objectives and key results that we want to achieve, but we're also by fiscal year quarter. So every 3 months, we're setting out goals or objectives and key results to ourselves and aligning every piece of work that we do to one of those key results, which turns into an objective. And we're really talking about outcomes there, not really about a measurable or a thing that we, improved if we, I don't know, potentially, nudge down the response time on an initial response versus a resolution. We're looking more at like, why are we even trying to do that? Like, are we trying to improve customer satisfaction? We're trying to improve what we call a net promoter score to our customers, like things like that. It's really changed the way that I look at, measuring the things that we do. And what I think is really neat, and I've never seen it happen in the government, is like I said, every 3 months, we're just wiping the slate clean. And there are a lot of experiments at the end of the day, and we're not holding ourselves too much to the fire. Like if we didn't do it, maybe there was a reason why. And it's a larger conversation to have. And sometimes the ones from one previous fiscal year might get transitioned to the next, or some of them might just get dropped altogether because things have changed now. And you said it earlier, technologies are changing too rapidly to keep up with, and we have to pivot and start looking at completely new objectives and key results in the next quarter so we can hyper focus on that. So one final thing I'll mention is back to the tool. We use a product that aligns every single issue or ticket to an actual key result, which then nudges up an objective. And when I first started talking, back in the Army vignette, usually it's at middle to upper management making those decisions on where we're going. Where we work today in Platform One, everybody in the organization gets to influence a key result or objective because every ticket that you work on should be or is aligned to one of those key results or an objective, which I think is really neat. You get to see what you do actually affecting the organization. So it's another cool thing that a tool can do for you. And we can talk dashboards and all that thing all day long, but if I'm logging in and nugging out the list that I have for the day, and 5 out of the 10 tickets that I complete actually are at the strategic level, that's really intrinsically motivating for someone like me. So
oh yeah, we like ticking boxes off and saying I feel good about what I did. But I want to get back because you brought up something and you've talked through it a couple times. What you're talking about is value stream mapping. You're saying I only want to focus on what's important to my users and consumers, And it gets kind of into that lean, let's find the white space and eliminate the white space. And, if our old incident management process takes 10 steps, but we can do it in 8, let's do it in 8. Like there's no reason to do those other 2 just because it's the process.
Yep.
And
No, you're spot on. It's cool because every time we talk, Jeffrey, we have like these like aha moments and stuff. And what's really interesting too, and I can't say this enough, and I hope other potential organizations in the government specifically listen to this, but we have, true designers / UI UX folks that work in Platform One, and I've never been around those folks before. I've taken, several classes with like IDEO and other organizations on human-centered design and stuff, but when you work with professionals that actually do value stream mapping and persona mapping and actually reach out to our current customers and capture their feedback and try and weave all of that together to find out, the things that we do actually aren't delivering the value that we thought they were, man, that's a very honest moment for anybody. And you have to challenge a lot of assumptions that you have because the data that they're presenting to you just doesn't validate what you might internally think that you're, crushing it on and doing really well. So again, back to the whole point of value creation. If you're not doing that, you've got to stop. And that's a bold thing to do half the time. And having those true designers on a staff be able to sit down with the team, with the operations developers, those type of folks, and show the process and where there's potential areas to improve based on the data of the value being created, magic happens. It's been really neat to be a part of that process because I've never personally seen that. So yeah, you're spot on. It's very important.
It is, and it's fast feedback is better than slow. It gets to your metrics, doing them quarterly versus annually. If anything, the last 2 years have taught us. You remember those before, there'd be year-long projects, kick off in January, and hey, we'll finish in the 4th quarter.
Yep.
Think about all this, how many turns and twists we do in a year. Nowadays, I can't, we're in, early in the year, I can't tell you what summer's going to look like. And I mean, much less the end of the year. Those assumptions, we have to challenge them. And I agree with you.
Yeah. And one final point I'll make is, we talk about change and being adaptable and stuff. I think something else that we should do more often too, and another thing that, aligns great to this like quarterly battle rhythm that we have at our organization is, patting yourself on the back or taking credit for the things that you actually did accomplish. Yeah. And if you're sizing the objectives and key results or initiatives the right way, you should be able to knock them out relatively quick versus it be this like giant elephant that you're trying to, take bites out of throughout a year or two that you never really see any progress made. I think that's a great, visual and aspect of, us breaking it down by quarter. And just, little small changes can eventually add up to like these large monumental shifts in an organization. And I can't stress that enough. It's been really, I think that's critical to getting people to keep buying into what you're doing and to keep, the laser focus on this is the direction we need to go, but we might need to go right then left, then maybe back and then back up to the right. It's just given today's world and I'll even mention it too, the budgeting cycles that we go through, especially in the government. I mean, you all saw it. We had 2 continuing resolutions signed in the last, 4 months. You can't even imagine what that does to our cycles inside the government, but we get through it. We've been getting through it. And you just gotta keep pushing forward and taking credit for where credit is due.
Oh, celebrate wins. Nothing like team celebration of wins or boss celebrating the wins of their people to really help morale. Everybody talks about this. We're going a little bit off topic, but the great resignation, all this. I'm like, they're just talking about a disconnect between leadership and the workforce. And we need to be able to celebrate these wins. We need to be empathetic when people are going through difficult times. And we just have to bridge that gap and be more real to them and be transparent and, say, hey, we missed. I know that led you off track. Okay, let's now we can adjust. You get me going on this, Stephen. It's just one of those things that we've had these fronts up so long that it's so good to be able to celebrate. I don't care if it's personally, with your family, professionally, we should celebrate more frequently.
Absolutely. And think about it too, Jeffrey, in today's new virtual world that we live in, how much more difficult it is to have that personal connection, that moment where we're patting each other on the back virtually, virtual high fives and stuff. We gotta do it more often, I think, now via Zoom and other tools that are out there. It's just a new opportunity and challenge, let's say, for people, leaders, to get after.
Yeah, it's all on the leaders. I don't mean that. I'm saying leaders out there, this is yours to go accomplish. So we have a couple of topics I want to touch on before we close. So given your role with DevSecOps, leading the party bus, new technologies are coming, RPA, AI, and they impact the DevSecOps, the service management. They are going to impact how we do work in the future. Is that your view of it as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, I keep saying absolutely, but yes. One of the cool things we have on our team is, we have an internal automation team that's looking at, where can we automate where necessary so that a customer can come to our proverbial doorstep virtually. And after all the money and funds are, exchanged, all automated, by the way, they're able to self-provision the environments and tools and capabilities that they need without human interaction. That to me is absolutely where we want to go. And we want to put people on more of the harder problems to solve and the more of the one-on-one interactions that I think people really want at the end of the day. So one thing, like I mentioned, the auto provisioning of configurations. And when we're talking more of like an IT organization where I'm managing the actual network itself, being able to push configs more often without human interaction and intervention. We've talked about the whole chatbot service desk kind of capability. I know a lot of people do it. I've actually been, I've actually used those services as well with some of the things that I have personally. And I think it's just going to get more and more as it gets more aligned to, current services that are offered, the SLAs behind those services. Are you even available to take and provision that service for this specific persona or user? All that can be automated, and it should be automated, and given that kind of pseudo personal touch, if you will.
Yeah.
And then I think finally to mention, software defined networking and prediction of, parts on the network. If there's switches, routers, gateways, that might be end of service, end of life cycle. Something in the military and the army that we just came from that was a huge problem that we were trying to solve constantly. Is where are your most vulnerable assets located throughout your physical theater, your physical imprint. So you might not need to actually replace everything as often as you think, just because the contract lapsed or whatever. But you have to be able to look at certain parts of how it's operating, the availability, the capacity of said infrastructure, and then make those calls based on AI and algorithms in the background doing the predictions for you, and then failing over where necessary. And all of this, again, can be all automated. So I think it comes down to that, the automation aspect of it. And then, as all that happens, and we'll probably get into it in the next question here, you've got to balance the automation with the actual one-on-one support that people are desperately craving. So that's where I think the future is going.
And I want to prime you for that question, okay? So in the service management world, I see AI being disruptive in a positive way. The AI can go find your root cause for your problem management. It can assess the risk of a change. It can do all of that pretty automatedly. But when we talk about that, we still need to, everybody thinks, oh, AI is going to replace humans and all this sort of thing. I'm like, oh no, it makes us more valuable, because we're all worried about the sci-fi movies of the AI gone awry, right? Or, it makes us more dependent on those humans. And so let me lead you with this question. What do you think the future of service management is with all of those technologies at play, because you can't have them all at the same time. You have to figure out how are we going to roadmap this?
I'm always a believer in the one-on-one interactions, and even coming out of a post-COVID world where we're at today, and everything being behind a screen, behind an app, behind, ordering something that just shows up on your door. Where's the human to human interaction there? I personally don't see it as much as maybe we would like. And especially if you come into an issue or a problem with that same, request fulfillment process, where do you turn? Because a computer won't have empathy. I mean, how do you build an algorithm for empathy or compassion? I don't ever think that's going to happen. However, where I think service management will grow is in that upfront, again, talking version 3, the service strategy type processes that have always been there, that continue to be there, and that we really need to go all in on. And I'm always reminded of Office Space. If you haven't seen the movie, you've got the one guy there that's he's the people person. He's good with people, between the customer and the actual developer or designer. He's made fun of in the movie, but in my opinion, those folks are really critical in all of this. So something that we've done at Platform One is we've gone all in on actually creating what we call business account managers, which are basically just a belly button for a customer to contact when they have an issue, concern, problem, feedback, request, when we want to re-up with them. At least it's someone that they can contact, that they know they can get a response to. And then I'm reminded of another TV show, The Office. That's really what Dwight Schrute and Michael Scott did all the time to capture those customers. Was they would show that off, the big company coming in, and the risk of that organization going with a big company. They might be cheaper now, but they'll be more expensive later, because they'll just undercut everybody and then raise prices. But the person-to-person interaction is an intangible that people got to go all in on. I think people are craving it. I think we're all looking for human connections more than ever today. Yeah. And if you could go in on those, business relationship management processes and those kinds of things, you're going to be more successful in the future.
And two things I know to be true: we spend money with people we like, and time as well, right? Like, we go to restaurants where we like the people, right? There are places we like the food, dislike the people, so we never think it's worthwhile. You know what I'm saying? Like, we spend money with people we like. And when you're in a service-oriented business, Platform One or my company or whatever, people have to like doing business with you. And it has to be easy doing business with you. That's number one. And number two, they always have to have faith that you'll take care of it. And that usually involves a human, right? Like, stuff's going to happen. I don't care what kind of service they're ordering from Platform One, stuff is going to happen. And they have to have faith that you'll take care of it. And having that point person with that relationship, because we give more grace to people we have a relationship with. You know what I mean? Like it or not, we give grace to those people because they're more than a name. They're more than, an email that we don't know if it's really automated or not. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that how we consume services, those two are true.
Yeah. And I just get back to how the world is right now. And we're still learning as we go, because some of the things, I recently transplanted to Texas, right? And I just went through the processes of getting my car registered and the driver's license, and how frustrating those processes are, because we all make fun of going to the DMV. Like, it's not a pleasant experience. I will caveat that by saying, where I went, when I finally got to talk to someone, they were actually quite good. Just the backlog was so large. And when you make an appointment for something like that, you want to know you're going to be seen. And conversely to what we're talking about, when you throw a ticket at somebody, you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs, hoping you're going to hear from them within a certain specified time limit, or you might not even be aware of what the time limit is. There's total ignorance there. So your expectation might be, I'm going to hear from them in an hour. And the organization, the service provider, might think, oh, I got a week to get back to this person. So it's all expectations management. Again, if you have that business relationship going on throughout the service or value delivery process with this customer, you just have to think longer term than the transactional aspect of most things today. And sadly, we are there today. I hope that it changes in the future. But hopefully you and I, Jeffrey, can keep beating that drum and change some people's mindsets out there.
We'll try. And so it's great having you back on the podcast, Stephen. I always enjoy our talks because we're pretty like-minded, and just that, how things are done. And so it's great having you back in stateside. Great hearing you're doing well. Any parting words for you, Stephen, before we let you go?
Sure. One final thing I'd like to say is completely irrelevant to our conversation today, but I took my family to Europe to live and work in a completely new environment. You might think DevSecOps is somewhat like that, a completely new environment. You just don't understand the language and the culture and all that stuff. Coming back now to America, Jeffrey and I were talking about this right before we started, of some of the culture shocks that I've been going through coming back here. Don't be afraid. I would just say, just first and foremost, don't be afraid to take, those first followers you might have within your organization into a world such as what DevSecOps could do for you. There's just too much to be gained. And if anything, look at it as a fail fast kind of process. If you look into it and it's just not for you, you didn't lose anything, in my opinion. And I'll even conversely say it's the way at least the software development world is going. I think there's just too much momentum behind it. And it's taken, all of these TQM and ISO 9000 and CMMI and now ITIL to a certain extent, and all of these good ideas and Agile, and kind of thrown it all together. And now it's all like wrapped around this DevSecOps mindset, which I'm sure it'll change again in the future. So you owe it to yourself to check it out. And then finally, I will say, kind of piggybacking on what we just talked about with the person-to-person interactions, I will say working in a virtual environment, one final thing about Platform One is we're virtual first. And I've never been in an organization such as that as well. Over communication cannot be oversold.
Right.
Communicating early, often, and this is where it gets tricky. There's many different ways and channels to communicate with individuals and people and humans. You've got to figure out which ones of those work the best. And as a leader, ensure that you are delivering on those platforms and channels as often as you can, just to keep people together. It's really hard to do it through virtual screens such as this half the time. And I think we're all still learning how this is going to look like in the future. Some do it better than others. I'm definitely learning as I go. I am not an expert in this area by any means. But that's one thing that I have truly realized recently, that you just got to make sure people are all together and feeling that connectedness that we might have lost by going to a physical building, 8 to 5, Monday through Fridays. We've really lost that. And I hope you all have a great 2022. Cheering for a lot of you out there. It seems like 21 was supposed to be that great year where we turn a corner. Hopefully this is that year. And and good luck to you, Jeffrey, as well. Can't wait to be back on the show in the next few months or whatever.
Yeah, it'd be great to have you on. And you struck on some things that I think not one communication style works best. Like communication is some on the giver, but it's the giver understanding how it's going to be received. And that's why having multiple channels, understanding those people, some people like text, some people hate text. I mean, like, you have to know the difference, and you can't just blast text everybody,
Yep.
thing. But it's great having you on, and we'll have you on again. I'm very glad you landed well and happy and all sorts of things. So thank you once again for joining us.
Thanks.
Have a great day. Bye.